Spirit, and welcome. We'll start our session today from More Voices, number 161. I have called you by your name. I have called you by your name, you are mine. I have gifted you and ask you now to shine. I will not abandon you, all my promises are true. You are gifted, called and chosen, you are mine. I will help you learn my name as you go. Read it written in my people, let them grow. Pour the water in my name, speak the word your soul can claim. Offer Jesus' body given long ago. I know you will need my touch as you go. Feel it pulsing in creation's ebb and flow. Like the woman reaching out, choosing faith in spite of doubt. Hold the hem of Jesus' robe and let it go. I have given you a name, it is mine. I have given you my spirit as a sign. With my wonder in my soul, make my wounded children whole. Go and tell my precious people they are mine. And one more from Voices United. It is number 634, to Abraham and Sarah. Though I'm not actually playing out of Voices United, just so that I don't have to flip between text and music. It is number 634, yes. All right. To Abraham and Sarah. To Abraham and Sarah, the call of God was clear. Go forth and I will show you a country rich and fair. And you not fear the journey, for I have pledged my word that you shall be my people, and I will be your God. From Abraham and Sarah arose a pilgrim race, dependent for the journey on God's abundant grace. And in the heart was written by God His saving word, that you shall be my people, and I will be your God. We of this generation, on whom God's hand is laid, can journey to the future, unpure and unafraid, rejoicing in God's goodness and trusting in this word, that you shall be my people, and I will be your God. All right. This is Lent. We'll be coming into, well, welcome to the season of Lent. And we'll be looking towards this coming Sunday, which is Lent 2. And the lectionary is talking about the covenants. And this week it is the covenant of trust, or perhaps you could even look at it as the covenant of generations. And I'd just like to read a portion of this coming Sunday's readings from Genesis 17, verse 1 to 7. And it says, "When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, 'I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and blameless. Then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers.'" And as we heard in the hymn, Abraham fell face down and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you." And not to forget Sarah, from verses 15 and 16 of chapter 17, God also said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her." So let's remind ourselves, we're talking to Abraham, 99 years old. If that isn't generations, I don't know what is. But I have a reading for you. It's a story, actually, and it is, I thought it was just so appropriate. And it is the composer of the hymn, "I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say." And the story says, anyone can work with adults, but it takes a special person to communicate with children. Among the early hymnists, none connected with youngsters better than Horatius Bonar, the prince of Scottish hymnists. Horatius was born just before Christmas in 1808, one of 11 children. Two of his siblings, John and Andrew, also became outstanding preachers. After studying for the ministry at the University of Edinburgh and serving an internship, Horatius was ordained and began pastoring in Kelso. Later he moved to Edinburgh, where he became one of Scotland's most famous pulpiteers. He began writing hymns while at Kelso, and many of them were especially for children. Later in his church in Edinburgh, where only the Scottish version of the Psalms were sung, only the children were allowed to sing his hymns. On one occasion in the adult services, two of his church leaders stormed out in protest when a hymn was announced, but the children never protested. They loved his visits to Sunday school when he would lead them in exuberant singing. Horatius wrote, "I heard the voice of Jesus say," for his Sunday school children in 1846. On the page containing the words, he doodled 4 faces and the head of a man wearing a hat. See, creative spirit, what am I saying? He based his 3 verses on 3 wonderful promises of Jesus in Matthew 11, verses 28, John chapter 4, verse 14, and John 8, verse 12. The first half of each stanza echoes our Lord's promise, and that last half of each stanza frames our response. Where did his love for children come from? He and his wife had lost 5 of their children in rapid succession, but God gave him hundreds of children in his Sunday schools. And that's not all. Many years later, a surviving Bonar daughter was widowed and returned home to live with her parents. She had 5 young children. Writing to a friend, Horatius said, "God took 5 children from life some years ago. and he has given me another 5 to bring up for him in my old age. Horatius was nearly 80 when he preached in his church for the last time. Among his last requests was that no biography of him be written. He wanted all the glory to be Christ's alone. I just think that there's such a lovely parallel in so many regards of Horatius and Abraham, that Horatius felt that he was given so many children through his Sunday school, and that the loss later in life as an old man, granted not 99, a mere 80, to have his daughter return and have 5 more children to bring up in this world, and that he had felt that this was not of his doing, that this was certainly all of God's doing, and that all the glory be, that was his calling, and all the glory be to God for it. And so we're just going to keep that in mind as we sort of talking about generations. I mean, the trust, right? We're talking about the trust that these individuals had in God, pure and simple. But at the same time, perhaps these generations, we always look to the younger generation as being the church coming up, but perhaps too it is the older generations that are still new. There is still so much newness happening in very late in Abraham's life, and newness happening in Horatius's life later in life. So let's just take a moment in prayer, shall we? God of all creation, we know that all that we have, all that we are, is blessed and blessing in this sharing. We add our blessings to yours. May all of these blessings bring hope and healing to your world. Amen. I apologize. I meant to do this before our prayer. I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to sing Horatius's hymn, and that keep in mind that just maybe listen to it in a different in a different voice, his voice now, knowing a little bit about him, but that it was also written for children, and something that I would never have thought ever singing this hymn. So from Voices United, you know what? I don't have it off the top of my head. I will give it to you on the screen because I'm playing it again. It's the lyrics, music versus text thing. I will give it to you on the screen, but it is, I heard the voice of Jesus say. I found in him a now let's move on to our spiritual practice.
All right, so part of what we are going to be doing today are these fun, interesting, I guess you could call them monograms. They're lettering, they're initials, single letter, but with a whole lot of fun pattern and embellishment. And what I would like to do today, and actually through sort of the rest of the season of Lent, is think about, as part of our prayer practice, writing letters to individuals. And it only has to, I'm not saying that you have to write a whole bunch of letters throughout the week to a whole bunch of people. No. What we're going to do is I want you to focus on one individual, and it will be that individual whose initial you will be doing. And you have a couple options. So let's just get to, before we get to the whole letter writing process and the initials, what we need. So you will need, and I just have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. It could just be, you know, the plain white copy paper, because it'll be as you're going to be writing a letter, you could actually do this right on the paper itself, which would be a great idea. So the cardstock, I was thinking initially that if you were to cut your cardstock down into other sizes, right, then you could just insert it into an envelope and send it off with your letter. But as I was preparing for the session, I thought maybe it's just smarter just to actually do it right on the paper that you would be sending out with the letter, so that it is like the letterhead, it's the monogrammed. It's almost as if it's illuminated on the page, right? Those, when you go to your really old books, like the original Gutenberg Bible, has these amazing, gorgeous, illuminated letters, and they actually have gold on them, and they have flourishes and depictions of animals and all kinds of nature, and it's just amazing. We're not going to that extent, obviously, but it is part of that, knowing that we were holding that individual in prayer while creating it. The other thing that you will need, and of course then I'm just using a clipboard as the surface, so that if I was using just the paper, your markers, if you're using Sharpie markers, can go ahead and bleed through and it won't ruin the surface that you're working on. This is an ultra fine Sharpie black, a fine Sharpie. And actually what I used for this is just a super, super fine, like really tiny fine ballpoint pen for the black, which you could do. And then you could use watercolor if you wanted to do this on watercolor paper, right? Just a tile, like a 3.5-inch square tile. Do your letter on that, and then you could fill it in. Instead of filling it in with markers or pencil crayons, you could fill it in with beautiful watercolor colors. Or if you've got, again, here's our bin of markers, right? And if you've got gel pens, this would be a great time to be using gel pens as well. So that's it for supplies, and now let's go ahead and get to it, shall we? Much like earlier when I forgot that I was wanted to play and read about Horatius and the hymn that he had written, I have forgotten that I wanted to speak to you briefly about the spiritual practice of letter writing. And from the Henri Nouwen Society, there was a lovely tidbit that he once wrote that's saying, writing can be a true spiritual discipline. Writing can help us to concentrate, to get in touch with the deeper stirrings of our hearts, to clarify our minds, to process confusing emotions, to reflect on our experiences, and to give artistic expression to what we are living, and to store significant events in our memories. Writing can also be good for others who might read what we write also. Quite often, a difficult, painful, or frustrating day can be redeemed by writing about it. By writing, we can claim what we have lived and thus integrate it more fully into our journey. then writing can become life-saving for us and sometimes for others too. So what more appropriate than time to be looking at writing letters then too is this journey of Lent. And goodness knows that some days are getting more frustrating, and if we can redeem a day anywhere along the way, I think that's a fabulous idea. Redeem away, right? But he also writes here that when I write, I think deeply about my friends. I pray for them. I tell them my emotions and feelings. I reflect on our relationship, and I dwell with them in a very personal way. Over the past few months, I have come to enjoy letter writing more and more. In the beginning, it seemed like a very heavy burden, but now it's a relaxing time of the day. It feels like interrupting work for a conversation with a friend. The beauty of letter writing is that it deepens friendships and makes them more real. I have also discovered that letter writing makes me pray more concretely for my friends. Early in the morning, I spend a little time praying for each person to whom I have written and promised my prayers. Today, I feel surrounded by the friends I am writing to and praying for. Our love for each other is very concrete and life-giving. Thank God for letters, for those who send them, and for those who receive them. So now on to our creating of our illuminated letters. Maybe we'll go with that. Maybe our illuminated letters for our stationery for writing our friends and family. Okay, so here are the two that I did. If you can't tell, this was a letter F. Perhaps maybe a little embellished, yes, but a lot of fun. And then my letter C. And yeah, these are just, they are very whimsical. And I just thought that it's kind of a fun way to, like I say, to prayer. It's very different than that other pray coloring our prayers session that we've done in the past. But so and these are just on cardstock. So again, like I say, you could do it if you wanted to do, you know, in the corner of, if this was a regular piece of copy paper and you were going to write your letter on this, then you could just, you know, do it up in the corner if you wanted to, or if you want to do it a little bit larger and then insert it in your letter, that's fine. You know, give it a try. Or if you want to do just one for fun, or perhaps for do your own name. Some of the hymns, you know, talking about the importance of our names and what does it mean? What does it mean to have your own personal name spoken, right? I mean, it is huge. And so our names, I mean, I can't imagine what it must have been like for Abram and Sarai, to have their names then changed by God to Abraham and Sarah, and what that must have been, how important that must have been to them to have their names changed. All right, so we'll just sort of quickly go through how you can possibly do this. I'll just pick a letter R, and I'm just going to use this little square of cardstock. And so the first thing that you want to do is sort of draw out. Now, we're not, right, no sketching, and again, there is no wrong. This is all fine and dandy. It's all good. There is no wrong. So in pen, right, I'm just using this really super, I don't know if you can see that on camera, how super fine that is, but this is the pen that I'm using. And again, you could be doing this in watercolor, right? You could be doing it in the ultra fine point Sharpies, and doing it that way, whatever. And then if you wanted and did the watercolor over top, that's fine too. So whatever you've got. And what we're just going to do is we're going to sort of give the basic shape of the letter first. So I'm just going to do sort of like the back side of the R, and then maybe come around like this, And then come around, give a little bit of an area there to remember we're talking about creating places where you can add pattern, right? So you want to sort of keep that in mind. And then maybe this downstroke here. And then maybe, I don't know, just for fun, another stroke like that. And then I'll give it gotta give it some sort of base. But it's okay that it's not connected at this point, all right? That's totally okay. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is add some more. Remember, this is about adding patterns and adding areas where you can add patterns and lines. And so go ahead and add some more lines. Add some maybe lines that go out on either side of the lines that you had already had there. And then same with your outline shape here. You can add another line that comes through and in, and you can see that this pen actually smudges. That was the one thing I didn't really check super well beforehand, and I probably should have, about the smudgeability. And this, I'm just going to add a little curly Q here, and maybe I think I'm going to add another. I feel like I want one more line here, but this one, just to sort of mimic the curly Q on the other side, I'll just go up like that. And let's see, maybe I want one more. Yeah, maybe just coming in like that. That's not so bad. And then perhaps another bottom piece like that. Just weight it up a bit. Yeah, looks good. And then we can add a little weight to some of those strokes, right? And what I mean by that is you can take the same pen that you have, or because that tip is so fine, I could go up to, the ultrafine Sharpie, and I could just add, like with the top of this, I could add just a little extra weight to it. And with these bottom, just add a little weight to the line. And again, this is a time to really just allow your creativity to sort of go where it wants to. How does it feel? Does it want the added extra curly cues? Does it not? Just add a little extra weight to this line here. And then maybe these lines here I'll actually just sort of connect. Add some weight in there. Right, and look at it and go, well, sure. And maybe because I've done this little piece here, maybe I want actually to extend one of these up a little bit. And just put a little dot or a little teardrop kind of thing on it and bring it back down and weight it up a bit. I'll finish continuing bringing this one down. I feel like there needs to be a little extra weight in here. Right, you still want the letter to shine through, which I admit in this one it perhaps not perhaps not so much, but that's okay. You know how it goes. You know the game that how our prayer practice goes. And sometimes it's about just waiting in those extra curves there too, right? And then bringing this curve, let's just give this curve a little extra weight. There we go. That feels a little bit better. Right, and so once you're happy with however those lines and weights might be, then you can go ahead and you can start filling in some of the spaces, some of these patterns and edges, right? And so each time that you add one of these lines, again, remember you're creating places for spaces for pattern. And let's see, how about this pattern right through here, because it's a fairly, it's a wider space. Let's do sort of like that, a triangle pattern, right? So just doing a triangle from the top to the bottom of that and following. If it's going to curve around, you're going to just follow with your triangles. Your triangles are going to get a little bit smaller if that's what the curve does, right? And then you can go ahead and you can add however you may want to embellish them. And in this case, I'm just going to add a little more, another layer of little triangles in here. Now, if you're somebody who does a lot of drawing with ink and that kind of thing, and you might happen to have something called a micron, a Sakura micron pen at home, then that would be ideal, because those tips are super fine, and unlike this pen that I'm using, they don't smudge, right? Like the Sharpies, they don't smudge, but that's okay. And in this, I'm just going to add, I'll just add some lines in behind that, so that it gives that sense that it's moving, the curve is moving, right? You can curve those little lines a bit too if you want. Follow that. Like that. And you could, let's see, maybe, actually maybe through this portion here, I'll take the other marker. Well, actually, through these, maybe I'm just going to go ahead and do some circles to fill in these longer columns. And again, remember to, while you're doing this, to really keep that individual in mind, and perhaps before we should have, before I started, it would be best to just sort of ask God to be present with you while you sit in colorful prayer for that individual. And again, you can always think of it like a conversation between God and yourself and that other individual, if that helps. And perhaps just thinking of their name, you're working on their initial, right? No, I'm not going to continue. Maybe I'm just going to add some little banding here, just because. Yeah. And let's see, over here, we could always leave some areas. We could add some solids. I still feel like there needs to be another line of some sort up here, just because. And in this one, let's go ahead and maybe I'll just do a simple looping around here. Sure, why not? And I haven't decided yet what I want, because I maybe do, I don't know yet. Well, maybe I will just, And then these little bands, you can do larger squares, right? Little bands. I could have done them in color too, or maybe I will just afterwards. Right. And so maybe at this point I may say, well, okay, let's just go ahead and add some color. Maybe the person's favorite color, right? There's always a good place to start with the person's favorite color. And again, this could be watercolor that you added in. You could be, I mean, you could even add crayons, and you can do these larger sections. And if you're never sure if you want to do all, sort of stick with one color or multiple colors, if you're having difficulty, sort of think to yourself, well, okay, you know, it's about those odd numbers again, right? And I could think, well, I can pick 3 places that I'll add purple. So there's a little section here. I'm going to add some purple too. And maybe this little, to sort of keep it more spaced out, maybe this section right here I'm going to do with some purple. Like that. And then let's see, I do love orange with purple. So I'm going to just take this section here. Right, and if you're doing this, you can always, if you've got pencil crayon too, you can always go over the pattern that you've done. You could have done the pattern in color. I just happened to do the pattern in black for the time being, but it doesn't mean it has to stay that way at all. Again, this is about your creativity and how you feel your piece is being created for that individual, and perhaps if you know that there's something that individual might like more so than something else, then by all means. So we've got 3 sections of orange, and again, you don't have to stick to this. It's just if you're not sure exactly how to go about, you know, the placement or where you're thinking colors might be best, this is just an easy way to start with, right? And think, okay, well, I'll start with 3 sections for each color, and then if either A, I run out of sections, or B, I want more of those sections in color, then that's fine. I feel like I need some blue here. So maybe these little sections, between these black bars in here, they won't show up super well, but that's okay. And gel pens, oh yes, if you have gel pens would be a lot of fun in something like this as well. And then I'm just going to give some green in here as well. Some of these poor markers are on their, I think, on their last little legs. I got some small little sections in here. And I'm going beyond the 3-section rule just because I feel like it. I don't need to go beyond that. Right? None of us do, because I feel like it. Good enough reason. Absolutely. And then perhaps I'm going to just do this line in the blue. And then maybe just continue out this line in the blue here. Interesting. It's kind of fun. Yeah. What other color? I do feel like something like, though, that this, I'm just going to go around it in the orange. Yeah. All right. Now you can continue to add more color to it, or there's always other embellishments. I mean, you can always add more curlicues if you want, or perhaps, let's do some fun little metallic spots. Metallics are always fun things to do. Right. And maybe gel pens actually would really be a lot of fun. Something like that. I like that. Now there is, as you'll notice on these, and I have to say that this is not something that I, by any means, that I came up with. No, and never do you see anything that I solely came up with on my own. Oh no. But this sort of form of lettering and doodling is something called Zenspirations. And it's there's a woman by the name of Joanne Fink, and you can Google Joanne and see her fabulous lettering. And in some cases, some of the lettering, she adds what she calls these little bits that dangle. She calls them dangles. Go figure. And so you can always, if you're feeling like you want a little bit more happening on here, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but just a few little places where maybe there's just a little something that you would like to add. Again, you know what? I think I'm going to do it in the black. We'll just come down, and it doesn't have to be a straight line. I'll just come down, and maybe maybe a heart would be appropriate for the individual that you're doing this for, or maybe a diamond. Maybe there are other shapes that have some resonance, or maybe you just strictly want them to know that that you are thinking of them. And then you can add other little dangles, and maybe with, again, another little heart. And the fun thing about these is make them all different lengths, right? Maybe here I'm going to do a little circle, and then maybe over here one more little heart. And you can color these in as well, or again you could use, let's see how the silver shows up. You just never know. Do a little silver in there, and maybe just the others. You don't want the others standing out quite so much, so we'll just do them in our outline color. And let's see, how about one more? I feel like we need one more here. Maybe just a little triangle kind of thing, and maybe those 3 little dots, right? And speaking of like the little triangle, I kind of feel like on the end of, what color was that? Orange. I feel like I want to put almost like a little arrow right on the end here. And whenever you decide that it's done, and if you're happy with how it looks, and you've decided that anything that you were going to color in has been colored, and if you have, like I say, gel pens and want to add a little sparkle, if you've got glitter glue around and you've decided that, there's some dots that, are screaming for some glitter glue, by all means, go ahead and let the soul sing in those moments and in those times. And like I said, once you've decided that you've reach that point where you feel that it has done what it needs to do. And that it feels balanced to you. And you would know that just by looking at it. You'll feel like your eyes either being drawn, or that there's too much happening in one area and not enough happening in somewhere else. And again, any little spot you could add another little dangle, as she calls it. And I've given you some examples. I've emailed some examples out. And so there you have it. There is your your little, let's just call that a love letter, right? That is your love letter. Wonderful. And there we have. And again, like I say, you can do them in any size you want on the cardstock. And if you want to do them smaller and less ornate and do it right, if you want, you could take a pencil on your blank piece of paper and just sort of lightly give yourself a corner if you want to keep it in a corner, or in the top right hand, however you would like to do it. Or maybe you want to do it right in the center and then write your letter around it. Whatever works for you, and however you, like I say, however the spirit moves you. And there we have some fun, illuminated love letters. We'll recenter ourselves now before you get going on your time of prayer in creating these wonderful letters and written letters. I love it when it works. And so feet flat on the floor as much as possible and your back up straight. And we are going to breathe in the love of God. And we're going to send that love as a warm, embracing hug back out to those we love. And breathing in the love of God. And sending that love and a warm, embracing hug to those we write to. And breathing in the love of God. And sending that love back out in those letters that we are going to write to those that mean so much to us and that we are praying for. And together we say, Creator God, quiet my mind before it passes judgment on this prayer, my gift of time to you. Amen. I hope that this sort of dual prayer session where you're praying as you're creating those illuminated letters, these wonderful, fanciful, full of creativity and love letters. And then when you sit, and it doesn't have to be in the same session, but when you sit down then to write that letter to that individual, may you also find great love and comfort in that time, that spiritual practice of creating and of writing. And may you feel much love in this week. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.